That was The Tonic, Now or Never, underground band on YouTube. I promised I'd play another one of their songs this week, so there it was, Now or Never. Anyway, good evening, Resistors. Today is June 14th, 2011, and you are tuned in to the WideShut Webcast with me, Keelan Balderson, on Resistance Radio. My website is wideshut.co.uk, and for everything Resistance Radio, it's resistradio.com. If you can hear me loud and clear, please let me know in the rambling anyway until it pops up. I was hoping to get Ian Puddick on the show this week. Ian, of course, is the plumber who had the City of London murder squad and the anti-terrorism police after him because his wife had an affair with a Guy Carpenter reinsurance bigwig from the city, and Ian exposed this guy's fiddling of his expenses because he was using company expenses to wine and dine his wife. It involved private intelligence firm Kroll and all sorts of nasty abuses of power. But it doesn't look like Ian can make it today, which is fair enough because his big trial is tomorrow, so we've got to give him time to prep his case. It's a 3-day trial until the 17th. And I believe he's also filming a new series of rogue traders. He's been giving the of the plumbing expert on that show, Rogue Traders, which I'm sure you've all seen it. You know, it tracks down con artists and scammers that you know, go out and do plumbing and all that kind of thing. And they film it and track down these people. And he's going to be the plumbing expert on there. So, you know, good things do come out of bad things, I suppose. If that's got anything to do with it, I don't know. But yeah, he seems to have his plate full, so he couldn't make it here tonight. Hopefully, I'll be able to get him on next Tuesday, where he can talk about the result of the trial. Hopefully not guilty. And it really is a big deal, this trial. Freedom of speech really is on the line. According to those prosecuting, he's being charged with creating a threatening blog. But according to those, you know, prosecuting, if you write something on the internet, even if it's true, and it upsets the person, or they claim it's affected their professional career or whatever, you can go down. That is a huge deal. If this precedent is set, that means if I write an article, I don't know, calling Tony Blair a war criminal, and Tony Blair sheds a little tear and gets upset, I could be a criminal just because Tony Blair got upset. It doesn't matter if you can prove facts. If the person's a bit miffed, then you can be charged. Now, Ian simply wrote on his blog the fact that this man was using his company expenses to wine and dine his wife. Who else has been fiddling their expenses recently? Could it be in the future that if MPs are caught in another expenses scandal, that the media will end up getting arrested for telling the truth because the MPs got upset about it? That's the insanity of this trial. So it's definitely worth keeping an eye on, and hopefully next week we can have him on to discuss the whole case, and hopefully congratulate him on his victory. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I covered the case to begin with back in, I think, January, but it had been going on for many months before that. And the mainstream media have only just picked up on it in the last few days, over the weekend, and another article I think came out today, coverage in The Guardian and the Daily Mail. But they took their time to look into this, didn't they? And I think it's an example of just how the mainstream media tend not to go outside of their comfort zone until they're forced to. I'm pretty sure if it wasn't for Ian's campaigning, because he's done a lot of stuff, you know, he's gone down to Speaker's Corner, he's camped in the Democracy Village, is it what they call that camp? You know, all of his blogs and websites and appearances and stuff. And if it wasn't for all that and the alternative media coverage, I'm pretty sure the mainstream media would have probably just ignored the whole thing. And it's the same process that we're seeing with the Bilderberg meeting. This year's, of course, was in St. Moritz, Switzerland. Yeah, mainstream coverage, most of it just dismissing that the event's even important, or, of course, as the BBC implied with their 2 interviews that I ranted about on YouTube, it's just a supper club. And anyone that believes that there's any more to it than that are obviously just Jew haters, or believe lizards rule the world, or they use lizards as a euphemism for Jews running the world. Well, whether Jews run the world or not, 130 of the world's most powerful people meeting behind closed doors deserves every headline of every newspaper in this country. And my point is, if there wasn't an alternative media breaking down the facts, if there weren't investigative journalists like Jim Tucker, who's still going strong with the American Free Press, if there wasn't InfoWars, people on the ground, activists turning up to the Bilderberg meetings and demanding answers, if there wasn't all this activism going on, then there wouldn't even be any mainstream coverage of Bilderberg. They would just outright deny that it even exists, like they've done for many years. It's only really the past 5 or 6 years that it's even been mentioned at all in the mainstream media. The whole thing's been going on since the 1950s, so it makes me laugh when you get these articles in the mainstream media dismissing it, saying it's not important, there's no conspiracy there. Look, we're talking about it. Well, you weren't talking about it 10 years ago, were you? And somebody on a forum, I did a Bilderberg article that wound up on, and the person said, oh, you know, great breakdown of what's going on, we need more people doing articles like this. But how many people are really reading it? And, you know, they've got a point. I don't even get 1,000 readers a day at WideShut. It's about 400. My other website's like thousands, but that's just about big oily men fighting in a ring. It's not going to change the world. But WideShut only has a few hundred readers. But collectively, it all adds up. The alternative media is collectively forcing the mainstream media to cover these things. But not only cover them, we've reached a point where they're exposing themselves with ridiculous articles like we saw from the BBC, ruining their own credibility, and while they're doing that, they're giving us more credibility. You know, the fact that the alternative media covered Ian Puddick's story first gives us more credibility. It's an exponential growth, and it is happening. I check my web stats regularly because it helps to sort of do the search engine optimization side of things. So you show up in the search terms. And I was on the Vinnie Eastwood show last Friday. Not quite what I expected, really. It was supposed to be a one-on-one interview, and it ended up being 3 other people who are well established in the sort of alternative community, so it's kind of hard for me to get a word in. But something I did mention was that during the Bin Laden hoax, my website traffic tripled. And I've heard reports of other websites in the alternative media. I can't remember what it was. It might have been the Intel Hub report about how their website traffic went up during the same time with the Bin Laden hoax. But yeah, 206 people took the time to share my article on Facebook. And that's just one platform. So we are having an effect. WideShut's not the biggest, Resistance Radio isn't the biggest, but we're growing, and collectively the alternative media is growing. And I think it's only up from here, so I just thought I'd make that point. It's not all bad. Yeah, we had the BBC hit pieces, but then we also had, or I also had on my video, a surge of people coming out and calling the BBC on their bullshit. So at the same time, they've harmed themselves and ruined their own credibility. This is all going to history. It's all being noted. The BBC were covering up Bilderberg. And when it all comes out, they'll look back at the BBC and say, what a bunch of scumbags. Or at least that's what we hope will happen. And hopefully next year, maybe some of us Resistance Radio hosts can make it to Bilderberg. I know John from We Are Change Birmingham, he was over there. I can't remember where I heard it, but supposedly he had to help Jim Tucker to his hotel room after too many whiskies. But yeah, I think if it's in reach next year and we've all got the funds and whatnot, we should definitely go and cover Bilderberg and protest it. I think it's time we got some young blood over there to help carry the torch, because when Jim Tucker ends, it doesn't mean Bilderberg ends. The next generation of activists to sort of get down there and tell them what's up. But I'm going to take a quick break, and we'll come back with the rest of the show. What I'm going to be doing is taking a look at the UK attendees of this year's Bilderberg and their various connections and dubious actions over the years. So stay tuned, and we'll be back on the WideShut Webcast. Okay, welcome back to the WideShut Webcast. I'm Keelan Balderson, and right now I'm going to get into the article I wrote over the weekend on this year's Bilderberg. The conference is now wrapped up, of course, but I think it's worth addressing who from the UK attended and some of the important points from our neck of the woods, so to speak. I'll just read some of this out. Around 130 of the world's powerful people have been meeting over the past few days at a picturesque resort in St. Moritz, Switzerland. It's called the Bilderberg Club, a Euro-American conference that hosts kingpins from business, banking, politics, and even royalty. It was founded in the 50s by Nazi Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, and has gone on to be a pivotal meeting of the Euro-American elite as they quest for more power in the New World Order. Obvious to some, but unbeknown to most of the British people, is that Britain is well represented at the conference, welcoming Chancellor George Osborne, Peter Mandelson, John Kerr of the House of Lords, and MP Rory Stewart even, among several banking and business moguls. So yeah, Bilderberg, folks. It was founded in, I want to say 54, but definitely the 50s, at Hotel Bilderberg in Oosterbeek, however you say it, in the Netherlands. Arjan pointed out a good observation about Aranovich. During his interview with the BBC, Aranovich said that Bilderberg was a town. Well, no, it's actually a hotel in Oosterbeek. So they can't even get basic facts right on the BBC when they're trying to poo-poo these conspiracy theories, and they're the ones not even remotely telling the truth. But there was another founder along with Prince Bernhard, and that was a man named Joseph Rettinger. And he was basically the main mind behind the European Union. And Prince Bernhard himself was a member of the Nazi Party. He also worked for IG Farben, who along with Rockefeller Standard Oil made the fuel for the German aircraft. So right off the bat, a good group of people there, you know, setting up a loving supper club that will help the world. Yeah, Nazis and yeah, lovely. And basically, along with the globalists and the bankers and the businessmen and the politicians, etc., the Bilderberg Club created the EU, which we still haven't had a vote on, but that came out only in the past year or so. Lots of reports came out, like from past Bilderbergs, the summary reports, the minutes and stuff. And the 1955 summary report went into how they created the European Union. They wanted closer and further integration in the fastest possible time. We'll start off by calling it an economic community, but we want to go further than that. And today, the American and European elite meet once a year at various hotels and discuss what's on the agenda for the world in the next year, and how they can gain more control and more power. So today I want to look specifically at this year's UK attendees. We know Bill Gates was there, Google was represented, the Federal Reserve was represented, people from Citigroup, obviously Rockefeller was there. But from a British viewpoint, topping the list was obviously George Osborne. Now I'll just read out some more of my article. George Osborne, Chancellor of the Exchequer, the man who controls this country's economic and financial matters, is off talking behind closed doors with the world's wealthy elite. Considering the banker bailout and the conservative policy of austerity cuts, the public need to be concerned. We only have such a national debt because the government decides to borrow money from the private banking system at interest, which we have to then pay back. We only have such a high deficit over the past few years because when the economy burst, thanks to the financial gamblers in the city, the government pledged our future on bailing them out. So again, when George Osborne is going to meet some of the same financial gamblers, rest assured he's the one getting the orders, not the other way around. It's not like he's going to go tell them to stick it. And it's a very simple point, folks. Give me control of a nation's money and I care not who writes her laws. It doesn't matter what superficial disagreements each political party has or pretends to have. Remember that video a few months ago where Clegg's mic on and he was basically saying, oh, we'll have to come up with something to argue about. Because they're the same, and it's all a game. They're all still working within the paradigm that the private bankers have set out. If you bend over and give taxpayers money to the bankers and enforce these draconian austerity cuts that were caused by the bankers, in other words, we shouldn't have them to begin with, then you're working for the bankers. There's no other way to spin it. And the proof is right there. Osborne is meeting top corporate and financial elite behind closed doors at the very same club that created the EU as well. So, do you think he's representing Britain at this meeting? We don't have sovereignty over our laws. That's with the EU. We don't have sovereignty over our money supply. That's with the private bankers. We don't have sovereignty over our army. They're off fighting corporate interests, like in Libya. Nobody there is representing us. General Rasmussen of NATO happened to be at the Bilderberg meeting this year. See how it all nicely fits together with everything. The chairman of Barclays Bank was also there, as was Douglas Flint of HSBC, the chairman of HSBC. And personally, I would like to know what these bankers and George Osborne are talking about. And I just want to run down some facts about Barclays, just to show you who they are and what type of people are at this meeting. To start off, Barclays are tax avoiders. In 2009, a whistleblower revealed that SCM transactions had produced between 900 million and 1 billion in tax avoidance in 1 year for Barclays. This was accomplished by utilizing an elaborate circuit of Cayman Island companies, US partnerships, and Luxembourg subsidiaries. Bullet point number 2. Barclays is the world's largest arms investor, holding 7.3 billion in shares, including with known producers of cluster munitions and depleted uranium. HSBC also has shares in companies that do depleted uranium and cluster munitions. Wonderful. Bullet point number 3. Barclays shares are with Citigroup. I read that wrong. Barclays has shares in the nuclear industry on par with Citigroup. They're the second and third largest banks to have shares in the nuclear industry. And of course, Citigroup also happened to be at this year's Bilderberg meeting. So, this isn't a meeting with the British people or any people, nobody's interests at heart other than the people that are there. These are criminal murderers, scumbags that invest in weapons that murder other human beings in illegal wars overseas that just benefit their companies. It's a wonderful system. We then move on. Another British representative, if you will, is the Prince of Darkness himself, Peter Mandelson, who happens to be an unelected life peer in the House of Lords. And to give you a bit of history, Mandelson was basically the mind behind New Labour and the sort of advisor to Tony Blair. Obviously pro-EU, like all other globalists. He was a former EU commissioner, and although he quit his post as EU commissioner to join Gordon Brown when he was laughingly sworn in as the Prime Minister, Mandelson still got a 234,000 compensation packet. And most recently, I think, the headline that comes to my mind about Mandelson was a story I covered last year, entitled "Rothschild Puppet Mandelson Determined to Censor the Internet." And basically, it was Mandelson who wrote the cybersecurity bill. And he wrote it after vacationing at Nathaniel Rothschild's Corfu mansion, along with a multimillionaire record company executive called David Geffen of Geffen Records. And that's a clear example of who Mandelson works for, an unelected life peer who goes on holiday with the Rothschilds and writes bills in the presence of record moguls. He's supposed to represent the people, not the corporations, but we live in reality, and that's how reality works. They do represent the corporations. And under the cybersecurity bill, of course, they can switch off your internet with no proof that you were committing any crime and with no trial. Just a claim by a company saying, hey, this guy stole my shit from BitTorrent or whatever, please cut his internet off. And that's how it works. No trial, no evidence has to really be presented, just 3 strikes and your internet's off. So thanks for that, Mandelson. And I'm sure some of you would have seen the funny InfoWars video of Mandelson and the Bilderbergers out on what looks like a school field trip. just sort of, well, you know, with their socks pulled up, looking quite pathetic, waltzing down this little pathway, and the video captures him saying, "Oh, I've just been accused of terrorism." And that's not too far from the truth, really, because old Mandy supported the illegal invasion of Iraq. So, really, mate, you shouldn't be surprised when people call you a terrorist, because over 1 million Iraqis are now dead in an illegal invasion. I mean, that's the definition of terrorism, really. So, stop being so deluded. You're a scumbag. Also attending Bilderberg this year was Conservative MP Rory Stewart. We are getting somewhere, because this is what Wikipedia says about Mr. Stewart. Rory Stewart attended the exclusive Bilderberg conference in June 2011. Columnist Charlie Skelton commented in The Guardian that this made it likely that Stewart would receive a forthcoming promotion based on the history of other politicians invited to the exclusive Bilderberg group. And maybe he will, maybe he'll be a future Prime Minister, who knows. But yeah, the alternative media and mavericks like Charlie Skelton, who, you know, one of the few people who work for the mainstream media that have actually gone there and done a relatively positive blog, an expose, making important questions. And because he's mainstream media, now Wikipedia takes the source, and now Wikipedia can say things like, this guy might become a future, which is, quite a positive way to go. Not that it's positive that he'll be Prime Minister, but I mean that Wikipedia can now source things and expose the Bilderberg group. And they can't say, oh, this isn't a reliable source, as they often say when you try and edit Wikipedia, because Charlie Skelton is a Guardian reporter, and that's as mainstream as you can get. But interestingly, before he was elected as MP, this Rory Stewart, there were suspicions, even in the mainstream media, that he was working for MI6. He denies it, obviously, but I guess that's part of being in MI6. You never admit that you're in MI6. And the intelligence agencies never admit any wrongdoing, like the guy in a suitcase who somehow got in there himself and shut it and died, or the 7/7 bombings. They never admit anything, so I think if you were in MI6, you're not going to go, oh yeah, I was, yeah. But here's an article from the Telegraph. Rory Stewart, a Conservative MP, has disclosed that his father was a British spy and conceded his own career path might give the appearance that he worked for MI6. So he didn't actually work for MI6, it just seems like he did. He can understand why people might think that. Asked by the New Yorker magazine whether he had once worked for MI6, Mr. Stewart reportedly said, "It's an unfair question." Well, I don't see why it's an unfair question. You either have worked for them or you haven't. While his mother, when asked, smiled and said, "I wouldn't begin to know." The article's author, Ian Parker, wrote that Mr. Stewart later suggested phrases that I might use, such as his career giving the appearance of such a path. So it's complete spin. It seems like he actually did work for and the author added that people should have the very, very clear understanding. Oh no, hang on. This is what the MP was saying. People should have the very, very clear understanding that I stopped working in embassies and for the government proper in 2000. From then on, I was no longer part of the system, Mr. Stewart told Parker. And now the author says, someone in London who is in a position to know told me that Stewart certainly was MI6. So this is the New Yorker magazine reporting that this Rory Stewart MP who attended Bilderberg is MI6. And that was the Telegraph reporting on the New Yorker report. Bit of a tongue twister there, but you get the idea. This guy's got some dubious history, it seems. Then, representing Syngenta, also from the UK, the chairman of Syngenta, a man named Martin Taylor. Now, if we look at what Syngenta is, effectively, it's a smaller version of Monsanto. In other words, this company genetically modified seeds. They genetically modify seeds and then patent them and basically try and monopolize the food industry. And this is what it says on their official website. The need to address food security has never been greater and is moving up national agendas around the world. Every day, nearly 1 billion people go to bed hungry, even more malnourished. And this figure could potentially rise with the global population expected to reach 9 billion by 2050. Of course, they don't tell you that the statistics state that at 2050, the population will dramatically decrease. There's also no mention that while they're trying to help these poor people with no food, what they're actually doing is monopolizing that food by claiming ownership of the seeds that they'll force onto people to grow, instead of letting these poor people grow their own food and being self-sustainable. So they've got this air of being this loving company when they're just like Monsanto. So again, that's the kind of company that's represented at the Bilderberg. Disingenuous, money-hungry scumbags that are destroying the world, the natural world. And as my friend Alan Craig, I believe he's from a We Are Change group, he sent me a message on Facebook saying, oh, basically, you can't make this stuff up. And he sent me a link to this Martin Taylor fellow, and guess where Martin Taylor previously worked? He was an advisor for Goldman Sachs. You see how all the dots connect? This is a corporate elite that want to control every facet of your life, and it all ties in with the banksters. It all goes hand in hand. It certainly isn't about helping the world, and it certainly isn't a supper club. And then on top of that, we have John Kerr, who's a member of the House of Lords, and just so happens to be deputy chairman of Royal Dutch Shell. Maybe some of that Libyan oil will be making its way to John Kerr and Royal Dutch Shell after this illegal invasion of Libya. I mean, he's there with NATO General Rasmussen. Maybe that's what they're talking about. Who's going to get the spoils? Who's going to get the plunder? Unbelievable. The next person is actually quite funny and ironic, because the next person on the list of UK attendees is Editor-in-Chief of The Economist, John McElthwaite. And I did a little Google on The Economist, and they just happen to dismiss the Bilderberg Group. And they've done that for several years in a row. Maybe they dismiss it because their editor-in-chief is attending it. That's their credibility right out of the window. In 2010, they ran a headline entitled, "First They Came for the Bilderbergers." So, you know, playing off that famous poem, you know, first they came for blah blah blah, and I was not blah blah blah, so then they went for the next lot, and I didn't speak out, and then they went to the next lot, and then it got to me. You know what I'm on about. And basically this article is about anti-Semitism, just like our good old friends Jonathan Kay and David Aranovich and the BBC stuff. You know, it's getting quite annoying that these establishment figures come out and always point the finger of anti-Semitism. One does protest too much, I think. If it's not the Jews, then shut up. Because all of you are Jewish, and you keep harping on about how we're persecuting the Jews, maybe just shut up, because you're not good representatives of the Jewish people. You're annoying, arrogant, lying scumbags. You're going to make people think the Jews run the world the way you carry on. And then this year, The Economist put out two other articles based as conspiracy theorists, and that it's a supper club again, and you know that they're just trying to help the world, and that the conspiracy theorists are nuts, the usual stuff. And then finally on the list is Richard Lambert, independent non-executive director of Ernst & Young, the financial services giant. So there we have it, folks. Nothing to see here, no conspiracy, just George Osborne, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the man who controls our economy, meeting with a bunch of immoral and criminal corporate and financial elite in secret. Nothing to see here, just a supper club. And some of those immoral elite are accused of being MI6. Most of them have been involved in scandals or immoral acts like funding the arms industry, but nothing to see here, folks. It's just a supper club. Just a supper club. Well, that's basically all I wanted to cover today. I haven't done any articles yet this week or over the weekend. I've been kind of busy trying to get this new 7/7 film out. It's taking much longer than I thought it was, and it's actually getting quite boring and annoying. You know, I haven't really got the oomph for it anymore, but I will get it out, I promise, by the end of the summer, and then I can put it to bed and forget about it for the time being. Just get all the facts out there and go, right, if you want to know what happened on 7/7, look at this film. And yeah, actually, I should mention 7/7 The Big Picture, the first documentary, will actually debut on television on this year's July 7th anniversary, and on July 8th as well. And I was contacted by Paradigm Shift TV, which have slots on Sky Channel 201, I believe, and then also on FreeSat. I'm not sure what that is. I think it's some kind of Freeview box. They also have channels that you can catch from Europe if you have Eurosat or something like that. And you can also watch online. But yeah, Paradigm Shift TV contacted me about the film. So yeah, it's going to be on TV. That's pretty cool news. I mean, I don't want to, you know, I'm not naive. I know Paradigm Shift TV doesn't have millions of viewers or anything, but to say that you made a film that's going to be on TV is quite exciting. There is a bit of hassle because obviously I didn't make the film for TV, so now I've got to re-edit it and sort of cut it up into chunks for each commercial break and try and get it to a point where it's not left, you know, people hanging and people will understand when it comes back on. So it's kind of annoying because I've got to go back and sort of sort all this stuff out and see where I can cut it up, and it's got to be within 17 minutes of each section, and it's, you know, quite a hassle when I'm actually trying to do the new film. I've also had to chop a few bits out. I've had to completely take out the false flag section and some of the stuff on Kosovo. That was quite controversial anyway, so not a big deal. Because it was 4.5 hours long, and that is a little bit long to be put on television, so I've got to cut it down to about... I've got an hour, 2 slots of 1 hour 47, so it's airing on 2 days in 2 bits, and then there's adverts within that time. So we're looking at like 3.5 hours, I think, of the actual film. But I'm going to edit in a little note saying this has been cut for TV, watch the full version on the website or whatever. But yeah, so if you've got Sky and Paradigm Shift TV, if you can pick that up, be sure to check out my film on the July 7th anniversary. I believe they'll also be playing things like The Ripple Effect and all the other films, sort of a 7/7 marathon that day. And hopefully they'll play the new one when I've actually got it done, because the new one is a hell of a lot better than the old one. I'm actually a little embarrassed to have it played on television, because the narration of it is a little bit, amateurish. I hadn't quite got down my radio voice at that point, so it wasn't brilliant. But yeah, the facts are in there, and if people are open-minded enough to actually watch it, I'm sure they'll look past any kind of dodgy narration. But interestingly, Paradigm Shift are also advertising for news shows to put on their channel. And they've picked up James Corbett of the Corbett Report and his weekly updates. And I was thinking, why don't the Resistance radio crew collaborate together and make some kind of a snazzy news show that we can put on TV and hopefully reach perhaps a wider audience, or at least have that badge to say, look, we're on TV, we're this is where the truth is at. Well, I don't mean it quite like that, but it's always nice to have that sort of stamp of approval, or make other people take notice and come over here and see that, yeah, we've got some pretty good hosts that know what the hell they're talking about, and they are also down to earth. They're not up in the clouds like some of the conspiracy porn people out there. We're real people that know what's up, and they're genuinely trying to help humanity. So I was thinking, maybe some of us should get together and try and produce some kind of news show and shop it to Paradigm Shift TV. I did do a test run of a news show a little while ago, if you remember, on my YouTube. I do have a green screen that can, make the background look more professional rather than just having the green sheet sort of behind me. But I don't know. I'll leave that with you guys. Is anyone up for that? I guess we would pick topics, discuss them, or share out different news stories to cover, and each make our own videos and cut it together or something. I mean, it may turn out to be a lot of effort for not a lot of reward, but I don't know. It's a different avenue. People like Alex Jones started on cable access TV. We don't quite have that over here, but the likes of Paradigm Shift are the closest we can get to that. So it might be interesting. I don't know. I'll leave it with you guys. I know Britt said he might be interested in doing something like that. We'll see what happens. Going down my list, there's a new documentary out on YouTube called Vox Populi. I'm not sure if anyone's seen it yet. It features interviews with David Icke, Max Igan. I like Max Igan. Freeman, Jordan Maxwell, Ben Stewart, the film Kymatica, An Esoteric Agenda, and Charlie Veitch. Pretty good film. New interviews, so that's always good. So check that out if you haven't. I mean, I don't agree with everything in there, but it's always nice to see new things being created. I'm not sure what the lady's name is who made it. I think she does something called the CTO report or something like that. She does some pretty good interviews, but yeah, check that out. But that pretty much wraps things up for me this week, guys. Hopefully, as I say, next week we'll have Ian Puddick on, so we can talk about his case and hopefully talk about his victory. So wish him luck, because he is in court tomorrow for a 3-day trial. Free speech is on the line. But that wraps up the speech tonight, folks, so catch you next week.